I'm Nora McInerny. I am an author. I am a reader. I am a podcaster. I am a middle-aged YouTuber. I'm a public speaker. I talk a lot about grief because I did a TED Talk about grief, baby. Is that where I thought my life would end up? No, no, no. But life comes at you fast. This will never be the list of books. This is one of many collections of books. Okay, I'm a pile girl. I've got piles all over the place. This is a pile that I found and I was like, oh, that's right. I wanted to talk about these specific grief books. So let's do it. This is Forces of Nature by Gina DeMillo Wagner. I actually met Gina because she was on my podcast, Terrible, Thanks for Asking. I had read an op-ed that she had written in the New York Times about the complicated nature of mourning her dead brother. Her older brother, Alan, was profoundly disabled as they were growing up. They grew up in a dysfunctional home. Nobody knew what exactly was wrong with Alan. It turned out he had Prader-Willi syndrome. He would not be diagnosed until he was in his 30s, but that disorder made him, or that genetic mutation, I don't really know the right way to describe it, but Prader-Willi syndrome made him unpredictable. It made him very violent, and it was a very, very difficult situation for her to grow up in. Forces of Nature is about grieving her brother. It is about grieving her family of origin. There is estrangement. There is dysfunction. There is abandonment. There is also so much beauty. Gina is by trade a outdoor writer, a nature writer, and she talks about the landscapes of the cities and areas that she grew up in and lived in an adult, and the landscape of her family just so deftly, so beautifully. Loved this book. Forces of Nature. Look, sometimes grief is fine. Grief is not funny in and of itself, but sometimes you just need to laugh. You need to laugh and you need something absolutely bananas, and that is this book. This book is called Griefstrike. It is by an Onion writer, Jason Roeder. Jason wrote that very famous Onion headline, "No way to prevent this, says only nation where this regularly happens." That headline is, of course, about school shootings. Jason's funny. Jason's very, very funny. Jason's mom died, not funny, and he decided to write this sort of parody satire grief book. I was guffawing. I read this on an airplane and the man next to me was bothered by my chortling. When you are in a quiet environment, I understand it can be rude to be but when you're trying to hold in a laugh, it's like when you're in church and you get church giggles, it just comes harder. And that's what this book did for me. We actually interviewed Jason Roeder on Terrible Reading Club. I think we can link to that episode in this description as well. He's just so funny. This is such a funny book. It'd be a good gift if the person that is grieving is funny. And it's also a good gift for yourself. If you yourself are going through grief and you're like, oh my God, I just need something that's absolutely ridiculous, but also kind of sincere too. That's a great one. I don't even know if they sell this one anymore. I don't even know if you can get this book anywhere anymore. It's called Don't Go Where I Can't Follow. I was gifted this book after my husband died. I was given so many books after my husband died, and most of them I threw in the garbage. I really did. But this one is so beautiful. It's by Anders Nielsen. His wife died. I mean, that's just the best description of it. Don't go where I can't follow. This is scanned postcards and notes and photos and little memories. And I just remember, and comic, is it comic or is it comics or what? How else would you describe this? It's just so beautiful. I read it sobbing because I just felt so seen. I felt so held. I felt like I knew Anders. I felt like I knew his wife. I felt like I knew this feeling so well. I don't know if this book is even for sale anymore, but if you can find it, this is the book. And this is a keeper. This is a soul book. This is a soul book. And look at her. It's ugh, and look at them. Ugh, I could just cry. I could just cry again just remembering this book. Oh God, okay. It's a memoir by Genevieve Kingston. It's called Did I Ever Tell You? Genevieve's mother died when she was 11 years old. She'd been sick most of Genevieve's life. She left behind letters for Genevieve. So it's not just about the letters, but there were letters for every major milestone. So we're going through these milestones with the writer, and we're also watching her grow, watching her relationship with her mother change, because that is the thing about losing somebody when you are young. Your relationship to them will change as you grow up and try to discover who they were. I don't want to give too much away because it is so beautiful. It was so beautifully written, and it's called Did I Ever Tell You? Just beautiful. Okay, This is not necessarily a grief book, but this is a book that is helpful for anybody who's going through hard stuff. There is really nobody like Pema Chodron. Nobody. I don't know how I discovered her, but I know that once I did, I would read these books. I think I started with this one, When Things Fall Apart, but I would read them almost like a little form of meditation or prayer. You don't need to read the whole thing at once. In fact, I think it's better if you don't. But she is a Buddhist monk. So guess what? She's got a lot of time to just like think about things deeply and write about them deeply, but she is also a person. She is a person who, if I'm getting the story right, it's in one of her books, when her husband came home and was like, oh, I don't want to be married to you anymore, she threw a rock at him. Okay. So she's also just a person, and a person who still, struggles with all of the things that people struggle with, which is pettiness and holding grudges and just being alive, which is such a messy, awkward business. And I love her. And this is one of my favorite passages of her writing. Okay. Things falling apart is a kind of testing and also a kind of healing. We think that the point is to pass the test or overcome the problem, but the truth is that things don't really get solved. They come together and they fall apart. Then they come together again and fall apart again. It's just like that. The healing comes from letting there be room for all of this to happen. Room for grief, for relief, for misery, for joy. Okay, this is another part that I read repeatedly and that's like underlined just heavily. Okay, life is like that. We don't know anything. We call something bad, we call something good, but really we just don't know. From this point of view, the only time we ever know what's really going on is when the rug's been pulled out and we can't find anywhere to land. We use these situations either to wake ourselves up or put ourselves to sleep. Right now, in the very instant of groundlessness, is the seed of taking care of those who need our care and of discovering our goodness. Life is a good teacher and a good friend. Things are always in transition, if we could only realize it. Nothing ever sums itself up in the way that we like to dream about. The off-center, in-between state is an ideal situation, a situation in which we don't get caught and we can open our hearts and minds beyond limit. It's a very tender, non-aggressive, open-ended state of affairs. To stay with that shakiness, to stay with a broken heart, with a rumbling stomach, with the feeling of hopelessness and wanting to get revenge. See, that's her petty. I love it. That is the path of true awakening. I've given this book to people who are grieving death, grieving the end of relationships, going through huge transitions. It's called When Things Fall Apart. If this doesn't make you love Pema Chodron, then you just don't love Pema Chodron, and that's okay, because here's the thing about reading. It is very subjective. What I like, you might not like. There's a reason why I don't go on and like trash books I didn't like, because like it just wasn't for me. That doesn't mean it's not for anybody. It doesn't mean that the book has no value. It might not have been for me, but like, okay. And besides, like, there's enough stuff like that out there, I think, and I don't really need to add to it unless I think a book is super harmful and extremely dumb, which I haven't really written about, but I got a list. I got a list of books where I'm like, no, why is this out there? Don't put that, don't write these things. Don't do that. Even though, like, free speech, baby, just because I don't like it doesn't mean you can't write it, but I wonder how much some of these people really believe the things that they're writing. Anyways, okay, I'm only like 5 pages into this one, so I don't know if I should include it other than it's coming out in October 2024, so it's new. It is a widow story. It's a widower story. I think it's kind of silly to like have a different name for like men whose spouses died. Like, come on, get a grip. Like, I think we can all just be widows. We don't need like a special word for it. But Charles Bach is married. He's a parent. He was kind of a reluctant parent, and his wife dies. So he has to take over all of the parenting duties. He has to take over everything, and he's got to do it all on his own, which is what widowed parenthood is. It is not single parenting. It is only parenting. I'm actually completely unfamiliar with his work, but he's a novelist. And so now, and which I can tell because of this first page, right? Frost dusted 14th Street. The taxi headed eastward, away from the hospital, along the imaginary line that separated downtown from the rest of this dark and morbid city. 3 a.m, December 8th. Not a word from the driver. Logistics swam through my head. Lily was staying with her grandmother, Peg, who was in town from Memphis. I'd have to talk with Peg in the morning, make sure Lily's day was occupied, a museum trip, something. I'd have to work on Diana's funeral arrangements. Tired beyond words. This is a man who knows how to write. A novel, and so I'm only like in the first chapter right now, but I'm hooked. I'm hooked. And so I have a good feeling about this. And I do like to I want to include a new book too, even though there are always new books. And I also really have a soft spot for finding books and supporting books that have not just like shot to the top of the New York Times bestseller list, because there are other books. There are other books out there, other great books out there. I have piles and piles of books around my office. I will be sharing more of them with you if you want me to. And if you don't want me to, that's fine. Tell me what your favorite books are in this genre and another one. If you want other kinds of book recommendations, let me know. If you don't, also let me know. Let me know anything. I want to know all your thoughts. That's it.